I want to talk about note taking because it's such an important part of the writing and the research process. And part of really good note taking is how to avoid plagiarism. So, as we know, plagiarism is a huge issue and none of us want to do it. I also, in my time as a teacher, often see students unintentionally plagiarize where it still has some really serious real world consequences. But I want to talk a little bit about that in the beginning and then move on to note taking. So just in case you are unsure of what plagiarism is, handing in someone else's work, right, a downloaded paper or from the internet or borrowed from a friend, claiming it's your own, using information or ideas that are not common knowledge from any source and failing to acknowledge that source. And that can be very subject specific, I tell students. So it depends what course you're in on what common knowledge is, but you want to think about your peers and what they know and what they don't. I also tell students if you have to Google it, if you have to look it up, then it's not really your knowledge. It's something that you're pulling from elsewhere. Number 3, handing in the same paper for 2 different classes. Although it's great to use the same topics and maybe you want to extend that thinking, part of learning in the class is going to be about doing the work and going through the process of writing it. And so that's why you can't hand in the same paper for 2 different classes. Number 4, using the exact language or expressions of a source, not indicating through quotation marks and citation that the language is borrowed. And that is kind of what we do quite often, right? We pull the quotation, put the quotation marks in. So we just want to make sure that we're doing that very clearly. And then lastly, rewriting a passage with a source with minor substitutions of different words, but retaining the same style or syntax and structure as original. This is what I see students do all the time. Right? You're not sure what to write, you Google it, you look at some stuff, and then you kind of copy and paste it, tweak it around a little bit and say, oh, that's mine. Teachers can really notice when you do that, so don't do it. It's kind of like if you were to dress in your partner's or friend's clothing, like people would be like, that's interesting because you look different than you normally do. That's how it is in the writing. When you're writing and then you push something in that's not yours, it's very clear that the style kind of changes. So instead of plagiarizing, here are some things to do. One is to paraphrase, say something in your own words about the same length as the original. You would still cite that, of course. Summarize, which is a reduction of large material into a brief statement that captures a basic idea, argument, or theme from original. Still would have a citation. And then, of course, a direct quotation. Think about quoting selectively, like mine phrases or sentences that are particularly distinctive and embed them into your writing. Provide context, say who the source is, and indicate why they are important. And then follow up with your analysis, your argument, your explanation to highlight why you use this. And in case you're wondering, all of this is from Bruce Ballenger, a curious researcher, so I am not plagiarizing either. This is a great resource, and I always say if you're taking another research course, this is a book that I have used when I teach research-based classes, and so we're going to talk about how to avoid plagiarism and take some really strong notes. So he lists 3 different types of notes, and I have demoed the double entry journal because I find it's the most helpful for students, but I do want to give you all the options because everyone learns kind of differently. So note-taking tips, right? First, you want to read the whole thing through and, text mark, take notes, do whatever. And then after you read it, do like a rapid summary. Just sit and write what I understood this to be saying, like think about what the thesis is. And then fast write an additional summary describing the thought process, like when I first began to read this, I did this, but then I thought this, and now I think that. So that's narrative note-taking, and I find that helpful as like a first starting point, but I don't find it gets into the deep nitty and gritty that kind of the double entry journal does. So a double entry journal is essentially a dialogue between the reader and the text, and as you read, you ask questions, you make connections, you note memories and associations. So on the left-hand side, you have they say, and on the right hand side you have I say, and the one that I give you, I always ask you for the bibliographic entry, the MLA format at top, just to keep track of what's doing what. If you're using a word processor for this, if you're using Google Docs, I suggest having a new document for every single different source so you can keep track of things so you're not completely overwhelmed when we go to draft, because it can get a bit messy when you're using multiple sources. I also find it's getting more messy because I use a lot of research on my phone, and so I'll email my stuff things, and then I have things in different spots. So kind of keeping that organized within a doc system, whether it's on your desktop or in Google Docs, is going to be important. So on the left side of this note-taking, you would write out passages that maybe confuse you, surprise you, make you think of other things, or kind of key to your understanding. So direct quotes, paraphrases, summaries, and I always tell students always put that number on the left side. You will save yourself so much time later when you're cutting and pasting into your essay. And this is the thing about note taking. You really are writing your essay as you are note taking. So in the right-hand column, you're going to write your responses to those passages. Sometimes it's kind of a three-write. You might jot down your thoughts. You might draw pictures if you're kind of a visual person. Maybe you want to kind of doubt what the author's saying and write some things. Maybe you want to question them. Then you want to try believing them and seeing its virtues, even if you still agree, kind of playing that back and forth, that scout soldier mindset. Shifting your reading perspectives. Also tell stories of your thinking. Say things like, my initial reaction was this, I think this, now I think this. Maybe questions, maybe other experiences you've had with this topic. Those are all going to really help you. And then they say, I like students to think about this to be 20 to 30%. Right, while this side should really be much thicker, much more full. It should really be about 70 to 80% full. So we want a lot less of their voices and a lot more of your voice, because you are the author and you are controlling this information. So the last one is the research log. And what I like about this one are these questions, and I kind of just use these questions as I do my double entry journal. What you would do is, what strikes me most? Right? What surprised you? What do you remember? What's convincing? What's not? How has it changed your thinking? How does it compare to other things you read, seen, heard? And then what other research possibilities are there to suggest? So would you answer those? You do your source notes, then you read it again, and then it's reconsidered. You do a second free write, and then you say what stood out to you the second time. What did you notice that perhaps you missed the first time? So these are great note-taking tools, and I will have, of course, some examples for you to show you different types of note-taking and what's it look like. But this is a crucial part of our writing process, and as I said, it is very time-consuming to do this, and you have to really read deeply and really take the time to process and think without being interrupted by other things. But this is you really writing your essay. If you take good notes, the drafting phase will be so much easier because you're really just organizing the thoughts that you already have on paper.